I'm delighted to welcome a good friend to Idea Collider, Melinda Richter, who is head of J&J Innovations, JLABS. And actually, the first thing I'm going to do is ask Melinda, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and who you do it for?
Sure, sure. Well, maybe I'll just give a quick introduction to what Johnson and Johnson Innovation is and what JLabs represents in that. So at Johnson and Johnson, we believe the best science and technology should become the best solutions for patients and consumers all over the world. And if we believe that to be true, we also have to be humble enough to say the best science and technology is just as likely, if not more likely, to come from outside the walls of a big company as to come from inside. But when it's out there in academia with entrepreneurs, it faces many more hurdles to becoming a viable commercial entity that can get solutions to the people who need them. So our job at Johnson and Johnson Innovation is to locally embed ourselves in innovation clusters around the world with the express intent to catalyze innovation, foster, accelerate it forward, do some deals with them eventually, and get them out to the market. And we do that through three different mechanisms. One is JLabs. Our job is to be in there and activating those ecosystems. And we do that through educational programs, networking events, and funding series so that we can build skills and networks and contacts, but most importantly, confidence in those entrepreneurs that they can do it too. You don't have to be Steve Jobs in order to have an impact for people all over the world. And then what we do is we take the most high potential plays and we give them a platform of resources that mimic the same sort of environment that our internal R&D teams have. So, for example, when we go into an ecosystem, whether it's in San Diego, San Francisco, Boston, New York, or whether it's in China and Shanghai, what we aim to do is to give them a place where they can be their most optimal, their most efficient. So we'll have a space called JLabs that's around 40, 50,000 square feet. Half the space is all common space. That common space is both community space where people can get together and have these kinds of dialogues and connections, or they can do their experiments. So we have biology space, chemistry space, filled with millions of dollars of equipment that every biopharma company, medical device, consumer health company needs to get to their proof of concept and then get the capital that they need. So it's a chicken and egg problem we're trying to solve, right? Most companies need all of this amazing equipment to get to a proof of concept to get the money, but they need the money to get the equipment to get to the proof of concept. So we're trying to eliminate that problem. And so we have this common space, but then you as an entrepreneur could come in and take something as small as a 5-foot bench, put it on your credit card like a gym membership. So you're not risking your entire life savings to try out your idea, your inspiration. And then you have an operations team that takes care of the day-to-day activities for you so you can focus on the science, and then a business services team that can help you do everything from as basic but not inconsequential as turn your idea into a company, and then have access to all kinds of services to allow you to grow and scale. And then while you're optimizing yourself and building equity, you get introduced to our deal teams at Johnson and Johnson Innovation, where you can do a customized deal based on who you are and what you want to do and what your technology is and the kind of impact you want to have. So you can do very traditional kinds of deals like licenses, collaborations, equity investments through JJDC or corporate venture arm, or you can do very non-traditional deals. Let's say you're doing something revolutionary and you are really excited about it, we're really excited about it, but nobody really knows for sure. And no company would put big money behind it. So we'll fund a proof of concept contract, no strings attached. Let's say it's $100,000, 3 months. Let's just all learn together. And that's what it takes sometimes, that leap of faith to try to get something from being transformational to actually having an impact for patients or consumers. So that's what we try to do at Johnson and Johnson Innovation. take all of that invention and bridge it to a point where in your world, I know you talk about, then it becomes real
Mm.
innovation, where
Mm.
people can actually feel it, where there's an impact to life, say, or quality of life.
That's cool. Can you give us a hint of the numbers involved in JLABS at the moment?
Sure, we're in 13 sites around the world. We're in the US and Canada, Europe, and Asia. We're just about to open our next location. Shouldn't say just about with COVID. It's a little bit delayed. We're going into Washington D.C. We're about to open up the old Walter Reed Medical Center, bring
Oh
it
wow.
back to its original purpose of serving patients. And we're doing that with Children's National Hospital, and we're really excited to be doing that with them because children are some of our most underserved
Mm.
patient populations. And in this campus, it's going to be multidisciplinary bench to bedside. So we're going to have a device innovation lab, a genomics lab, a rare disease lab. Virginia Tech is going to be there. FDA, NIH, CMS, and we're going to have children's on patient clinical facilities there. So that'll be really exciting. And we're also going to have our BARDA collaboration there. And who would have thought a year ago we would have been so prescient and yet still too late?
Mm.
So we formed a partnership with BARDA. BARDA is our government partner at Human Health Services. They focus on medical countermeasures against biological, radiological, chemical, nuclear attacks, and pandemics and epidemics. And they saw this threat on the horizon, like we're experiencing now with COVID-19, and they recognized that as a government entity, they couldn't move fast enough. So they calculated when they do contracts with companies, it costs a company at least $1 million in time and money to establish this relationship with them to move forward with an invention to take it to innovation. In other words, take something and get it out to the market, to the people who need them. And so they wanted a vehicle to be able to partner more quickly with innovators around the world. So we established this partnership. It was going to open in JLABS in Washington, D.C. at the end of this year. That may be a little bit delayed, but we're about to hopefully go virtual. You'll see soon. So that's really exciting. And with that, that means we've been incubating or incubated 650 companies around the world. Those companies
Wow.
have done exceptionally well. Over $30 billion worth of deals, of the deals that are public, which is only a fraction of what people know about. With that, we've had about, I think, 23, 25 acquisitions, 20 IPOs. And what's really exciting about that, when I look at the numbers, is that we also track diversity. So if I look at our numbers of female-led CEOs or founders, that represents about 30% of our portfolio. Compare that to the industry average of about 1%.
Right.
We have about 30% ethnic minority CEOs, and compare that to an industry average of about 8%. So, to a point about why do we do innovation? We do innovation to have an impact for people all over the world. And there's no question we're seeing with COVID-19 right now that there is not equitable access to innovation, to
Right.
that care. And most of the problem starts at the very beginning with invention. If the people who are inventing it all look exactly the same, that means they're just inventing for people who look like them because we don't understand. We don't know what we don't know. And so it is so important early on when we talk about invention, when we talk about getting people starting companies and seeing what the problem is or wanting to have an impact, that they need to look like the populations we're trying to serve. And
Mm.
that's why we focus on that. And you're going to see a lot more coming out from us on that. If there's anything that has reinforced that over this last week, it is all of the uprising that we've seen across the United States. We were just talking earlier about how I live downtown San Francisco. I'm in the middle of it. I'm in the middle of the sirens and the helicopters, and this is our call to action. You
Mm.
know, it's time for us all to stand up in many different ways in providing that opportunity, that access to people from the beginning. Do you have a good idea that could enhance life, that could save life for all types of people? And
Mm.
that's what we try to do at JLABS. It's just as important to focus on where are we going, and what is the impact we want to have, as much as it is in the beginning. um, who's starting these companies and how can we help them?
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I think are really interesting in the story. I think one, maybe we tell it this way around. So J&J leadership at the point when J&J innovation was an idea must have had the insight or the inspiration that they couldn't control all of the innovation that they needed to see. Therefore, they needed to do something along the lines that you're describing. And then they bring you in. Could you tell us a bit more about, how you got to J&J and what was their inspiration to kind of not try and control everything themselves?
Yeah, it seems like yesterday, and yet it was so long ago. I had started my own company around innovation in healthcare, and I'd done it because I had actually started my career in the tech industry. I'd been there for about 10 years, and I was flying high in the industry. And it was one of those things, it was the sexy thing to do coming out of college. And so I was on a fast track program with a big company living all over the world. And I happened to be in Beijing at the time, about to jet off to my next location when I got bit by a bug, which is very similar to what you're seeing now. And I was part of a small outbreak between China and Korea. And I'll never forget when the doctors came into my hospital room and said, we're so sorry, but there's nothing more that we can do for you. And I was struck by the irony that here I was in Beijing trying to figure out how to order a soda from the excuse me, the vending machine with my cell phone. And yet, I'm sorry, you cannot take a blood test and figure out what I have? How is it possible that all this money and press and talent is being spent on something that now seems so frivolous when some pretty basic healthcare gaps existed? And how could I have been spending my time on this over here when my life now depended on where it was over here? And I decided, that night when I wasn't sure I was going to wake up the next day, that if I got the chance to stay here, that's what I would spend my life doing. That I would focus on innovation for healthcare, not for tech, to make it just as productive, as sexy, attractive an industry for the best innovators and the best investors to get into. And so, 3 months of living on that edge of not knowing whether I was going to make it or not really changed me. And when I came out of that, I quit my job. I sold everything. I moved to the home of biotech. I moved to the Bay Area. And, no big company was going to hire me at the time. What was I? I was a tech person. I was a tech business person, and I was trying to innovate in healthcare. And so I started my own company, and I started my first version of JLABS. And within 5 years, our companies did remarkably well. They raised over $1 billion, and that was unique for early stage companies at the time. And I went to expand down to San Diego, and I ended up meeting a big company that had the same passion for the pursuit of patient solutions I'd only seen in startups before. And J&J recognized the problem because they have leaders at the top that have been physicians and entrepreneurs. So Dr. Paul Stoffels, you should have a podcast with him. Actually, I think that would be amazing for people to hear his story. He started out as a physician on the front lines of AIDS in Africa, and he got into biotech because his best friend, another physician there, ended up contracting HIV. And at the time, that was a death sentence. And his friend's 4-year-old daughter was his goddaughter, and he wanted to make sure he got to see his friend. watch her grow up and get married and have kids of her own. So he just started putting cocktails of things together to try to save him. And so he was one of the first entrepreneurs and created one of the first cocktails that actually turned HIV into a chronic disease, and he's been passionate about it ever since. J&J bought his company, and so now he's our chief science officer. He understands entrepreneurship, he understands science, and he absolutely believes that innovation can come from anywhere. And it doesn't matter if it's inside of J&J or outside of J&J. What matters is that patients get it, or more importantly, that we get it to them so they don't become patients in the first place. And so they recognized the problem. They were trying to figure out how to address it. And then when we came together, we realized we could put our mutual assets and strengths together, and that maybe we could change the face of the problem in healthcare innovation. And so we started JLABS. And what was really important about this was that it was to be a no strings attached model. Because when you first get started in life sciences in particular, the road is so long and hard and expensive that by the time you get to an exit event, at the time I remember when we first started, and I don't think it's much better today, but at the time when we first started, I think there was only 2 people that had ever become billionaires by starting a life science company. In the tech industry, it was prolific.
Right.
You maybe made a few $1 million. And so what we wanted to do is give everybody a platform to get started quickly and easily and make a lot of value before they had to go and do a deal, even with us. We wanted people to be incentivized to get into this space, both entrepreneurs and investors. And then we wanted them to come back and do it again and again and again. That's what you see in the tech industry, right? You got your Elon Musks of the world, your Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and they fund this ecosystem. They are part of creating this ecosystem. And we wanted to create this decentralized effect. And that's what J&J's been good at for many, many years, is decentralization. When we bring companies in, let them have their own world and space to execute. We know that if we get in front of it, we slow it down. We know that as a big company, we have, and rightly so, we have shareholders that rely on us to be predictable, that rely on us to protect their investment, and we want to honor that. And at the same time, we want to take some risk. So what better way to do that than to bring on all these entrepreneurs, give them the resources they need, watch them fly, and make sure that the ones that are succeeding get rocket fuel to go to the next level, and make sure the ones that fail are not failing because of silly things that don't have to do with their science and technology. And with that we'll get a huge global army of innovators around the world that are not only making an impact for patients and consumers globally, but really that we're allowing people to become heroes in their own hometown, right? You shouldn't need to go to San Francisco, to the Bay Area to be successful. You should be able to be successful in your community and spread that wealth with your community. And that's a really important tenet of ours. And that's why we are in all of these communities around the world. And we've seen a market impact. I mean, if you see, we went into Toronto in Canada in the Mars Discovery District of the University of Toronto and the Ontario government. And it's been remarkable to see the difference that's happening in that community. And, they are not only proud of the work that they're able to do, but that whole community is proud. And listen, we need all of that to be successful. This is not an easy industry to be in, for sure. And yet the impact we can make is so important.
But it's I think it's worth focusing on that moment when the no strings attached model was okay, because most companies of the scale of J&J would not have been comfortable with you look at your equivalents in other companies, they're not equivalent, right? They try and own it, they try and control it, they try to direct it. Having the confidence in the process of innovation that Paul Stoffels and others must have shown at that time is significant, right, in the story.
Yeah, well, it was a it wasn't an insignificant decision at all, and there was a lot of debate around it. And of course, there were people inside of J&J who were very nervous about this. That was a very novel thing to do. And listen, when we look at all the deals the companies have done, it's not all with J&J. In fact, GSK just came in and bought Mammoth Diagnostics, and Jennifer Down, my company. And at JLABS, we celebrate every one of those deals. If somebody else takes them and gets them to patients, that's what we care about. And listen, at the end of the day, that's what ruled the decision, right? At J&J, we have this credo, and there are 4 parts of the credo. And the first part is that we're here for the patients and their families and the doctors and nurses who serve them. And listen, our job is to make sure we're impacting patients. And some of these things are not in our strategic areas of interest. We're not the best ones to take forward. And we want to give everybody the freedom to find their best match, right? So part of this is not just technology. Part of it is chemistry and culture. And if we care about doing the right thing, which is impacting life, then we have to be open about it. Now, that means we have to be really good at what we do, right? That makes us accountable to deliver, to be the best partner. So they do end up choosing us. And you know what? I like that. That holds our feet to the fire to make sure we're being the best partners for those companies. That we come to the table in a way that's not just about dollars and cents, but what are you looking for? How can we help you be successful? What do you care about when you do this? Because listen, when you start a company, it's usually because something has inspired you or something has happened to you, and you take up that mantle and you're passionate about it. It's usually, especially in this industry, not about the dollars and cents. I mean, of course, to my earlier comment, we want to make sure are successful because of this, because we will pass it on, you will pay it forward. But it's because you care about something. You had a health issue yourself. You've had a parent or a sister or a brother, somebody who's gone through the process, and you know how hard it is to be sick. And you know what it takes out of you, and not just you, I mean, your whole community. It impacts all of you. And so we wanted people to know that we're coming into this with a holistic solution. And we want you to feel like not only can you achieve your dreams, but we're going to make sure that you and your team are whole through all of this. And that was a really important component. So at the end of the day, the credo always wins at J&J. It comes into every decision that we talk about. And that's why it's been one of those journeys. I never expected to be at J&J this long myself. I'm an entrepreneur, and I love being an entrepreneur. And what keeps me at J&J is that calling to a higher purpose. And I see it every day. Our CEO, Alex Gorski, Paul Stoffels, Joaquin Duato, Matai Maman, everybody across the board, Ashley McAvoy, Vlad McSherry, they live it, and we have fun at the same time. I mean, it's one of those, life is about doing really important work that you care about and doing with people that you enjoy being with. And so it's part of that life journey. And that's how we approach our partnerships, our relationships with entrepreneurs.
That's cool. And across those sort of 600 odd companies, have you got any clues as to, how do you gauge success for a company that's that's at the stage that those companies are at, and B, are there any clues as to what tends to lead to success in innovation in across that portfolio? So do you measure it first of all?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we're so early in the cycle to getting it to market that it's hard to know what's going to be successful or not. And so we look at the typical signposts that everybody looks at to know if there's at least, a platform for success there. So are they rock stars? And typically rock stars are traditionally looked at as serial scientific founders who had good exits, So they've gotten it to market themselves, or they've partnered with somebody else to get it to market, and they've had great exit in the process. So those are typical. But we also look at rock stars as not just experienced scientific founders, but a young, passionate, young scientists who've never done it before, but they have this vision of what they want to do, and they have a reason behind why they want to do it, and they're going to break down every barrier until they get it done. And those people I bet on big time. Arcturus, Joe Payne, and Pad are just two of those people who came in as two young guys who'd never had their own company before, worked in a small industrial biotech, but always had this passion for making a difference for patients. And you could see that passion in everything that they did, and we bet on them. And listen, they've IPO'd their company. They've done multiple deals with J&J. They've done a $1.6 billion deal with Ultragenics. I mean, that's the kind of rock stars we're looking for. And we're also looking for incredible science and technology, and we're looking for going after a critical unmet need that hasn't been serviced yet. And so when you look at those things and then you bring them in and then you still don't know, right? So, but you give them a little bit of support, so resources and infrastructure and connections and funding, and then you start to see who's taking that and doing something really productive with it. And so that's where you start to see deals going done. And then even then, sometimes, it takes a lot of work. There'll be some deals that come to the table at J&J and they're like, no, there's no way this is going to work. It's way too crazy. Like, it's too transformational. It's too risky. Let's wait. And that's when I get involved and say, no, there's something that has to do with intuition as well. And I don't know, I don't think that's a very comfortable conversation to have, but sometimes you just have your intuition about something and you say, listen, no, we don't know. It is incredibly risky, but if it works, it'll be transformational. Right. So let's place a bet. What's the worst thing that can happen? Especially if you place the bets early on, then it's not that risky. And you know what? Actually, when it gets to a point where everybody recognizes that it's going to work, well, then you're too late. Right. And then it becomes really expensive. And then, anybody can do it. And our job is to get in there early. And listen, it's still a struggle. It's a struggle for us. It's a struggle for every big company, because at the end of the day, all of us have shareholders, and we have to be accountable to them and how we're using their money. So it's fair. It's fair that we have that debate. It's fair that we take a pause and we think about those things, but we do have to take some risks in order to be leaders in the field.
And I guess with diversity, you've hedged risk in a few different ways, right? So, intuition may well be part of it, but you would expect and you'd predict that within an ecosystem that the winners are going to come from, not having a monoculture of approaches, not having the kind of, the single-minded way of doing things that other companies maybe have.
Yeah, well, that's what's great about the platform we have at JLABS as well, is the fact that we have all these different disciplines there. So we don't just have farm or biotech. We have medical devices too, and we have consumer health, and we have health technologies. And when you put all of those things together in one pot, it's amazing what comes out of that. So many collaborations and partnerships happen between the companies, and they think about novel things that they wouldn't have thought of before. So we had one company in Toronto that was doing these really cool stickers that you put on your skin for kids, and you can tell you when the sun, your suntan lotion was wearing off and you had to reapply. And there was another company that was doing vaccines, and they said, well, that's such a great idea. Why don't we do stickers for kids for vaccines instead of, a needle? And so those kinds of ideas don't come from just talking to the same person who looks like you and talks like you all the time. It comes from having this diversity. So diversity is in many different respects. It's from it's from different scientific disciplines, technology, business, but it's also people who look different, who come from different backgrounds, who come from different parts of the world. And that's what's really interesting, actually. What I'm seeing now is it used to be only big companies were global. We're seeing a lot of our companies that are small companies are global. They're in Shanghai, they're in New York, they're in San Francisco. And that's because we provide this platform that allow them to operate like a big global company. And, that's really important because, 1/5 of the world's population is in China. That's a very big market. That's a very big underserved market. So why not have something that could work in the US also being applied in China? And by the way, if you get something to work in China, if you get a company that's in China, figuring out, for example, diabetes affects Caucasian people different than Asian people, and how does it manifest? And if we have those learnings in Asia, well, we've got a big Asian population here in the United States and Canada. So, the world is flattening, and it's important that we foster that and that we bring these communities together. And so that's why I think our job is to almost be like a conductor of an opera or a conductor of a symphony, where you bring all these beautiful instruments together and you help create something that's magical, that's never been done before. And that's about letting go of control. And I think kudos to the leaders of J&J for making that decision back then. And listen, we've gone through a lot of different leaders over time, and they all stay the course. And that's a really important.
No, it's interesting, because I think I've written before about this idea that the new competitive advantage going forwards is about organizations' ability to learn, not to know, but to learn. And the more active learning that you can do with a culture like yours, you would have to follow that philosophy through and say, look, this is what's going to lead to success coming forwards, is we're going to learn stuff because we're doing it that no one else could possibly learn just by sitting and scratching their chins in a boardroom.
Yeah. Well, actually, what's interesting about this is the employees of J&J get as much out of it as the entrepreneurs get out of us. So for every company, we give them a JPAL. Somebody who's an expert at J&J in their space, or maybe even in a different space, let's say they've got really great technology, they're going after the wrong market, right? It's not a big market, or it's not an impactful market, but if they moved it over here, wow, how many people could they make a difference for? And so they get a JPAL, and that JPAL works with them to think about, okay, what big milestone do they need to hit to prove to not just a big company like J&J, but investors that this is the real deal? What kind of data would that take? What's the most efficient work plan to get there? And what kind of resources from J&J can we help deploy to that company? And it's amazing what that does for our employees of J&J, because most people who get into a big company like J&J, listen, that's not easy to do. That's a high bar to cross. And yet when you get in, you typically get into very siloed positions, right? You're in commercialization. You're not even just in commercial. You're in market access for, Remicade or whatever. So to now be able to experience the wave of innovation with these entrepreneurs, whether you get to learn about investment boards and why the path to innovation just isn't about the science and technology. I mean, you think about how entrepreneurs have to deal with, investors and multiple investors who have different priorities, and how you have to manage all that. And that's a big part of getting the science and technology to the people who need them. And that experience is really invigorating for employees at a big company. So, we all learn from each other. It makes J&J better because now they're starting to see what it's like to be a startup, but what it's like to act more like a startup, where you only have so much time and so much money. So you have to be incredibly focused, and yet you still have to see everything that's going on in the environment around you, about how you have to approach your role, your challenges with character and perseverance, and where you have to be ruthlessly, I call this ruthlessly transparent. I say this with my team all the time. We have to put everything on the table with respect, but everything has to go on the table. We can't be scared to have conflict. And then when we get that information on the table, we have to do something with it. We can't kick that can down the road. And those are things that you learn when you're in a small company, when you're an entrepreneur. And now the employees of J&J get to experience that vicariously through these relationships. So we're all learning. It makes us all better if we're open to the process.
Yeah, that's cool. And is J&J doing anything about its lessons from you and from your companies? Is J&J changing itself, or is it changing osmotically in that way?
Yeah, it was really interesting that you asked this. Our CEO has these leadership meetings. He does them around the world with the top leaders of J&J. So there's about 4 or 5 that we've had over this last year, and I do a workshop on how to act like a startup. And I put people through an experience. And in that experience, I bring in some of our CEOs and they tell their story about why they do what they do and how they're doing it. But it's in an experiential way. I have to tell you, at the end of each one of those sessions, everybody walks out with a little tear in their eye and a little bounce in their step. And so this is a priority for Alex. And he thinks of J&J as a 133-year-old startup. Now, how can a 133-year-old company be a startup? And again, we have to balance it with that. We do have responsibilities. People invest their hard-earned money in J&J, and we need to protect that. And we have responsibilities to them and our employees. And at the same time, listen, it's just about acting differently, right? It's about saying, we have to be incredibly focused with what we're doing. We can't waste time and money. And we have to still be open to everything that's going on in the environment around us. And that's a responsibility of ours to shareholders too. And listen, when you're doing something new, it means sometimes you're rocking the boat a little bit. Typically in a big company, if you keep your head down, you can probably stay the course and, get to retirement. You have your retirement funds. And you can never go wrong by just saying no, right? If you say no, something's not going to fail. You're okay. You'll probably get fully meets on your ratings. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to, we can't change everything all the time. I don't mean that. But where we see there needs to be a change, we need to be willing to stand up and say that. And we need to be willing to put out a few elbows here or there to get there. And, I had one role when I was in the technology and the telecoms was a hardcore BD role. And one of the things I learned from my mentor, my boss at the time, was it's never really a no until you hear it 9 times. And that's how I approach doing something new. It's like, yeah, I'll probably get about 8 no's. And when I get to that 9th no, then okay, then it's not going to happen. But it's all about saying, how can you create this shared common vision where people see in it what the impact we can have and what's in it for them. And when we all pull together like that, it's amazing what we can make happen. It's really been phenomenal, the things that we've been able to get done at J&J. And it requires people who are not scared to say yes, who are willing to say, how do we make this happen and bring the best out of everybody? And listen, it's not just about one person. It's about, how do you inspire this team of people to accomplish what nobody has ever done before? And that's about believing in them and allowing them a chance to flourish and shine, giving them a platform, but all routed around what's the impact we're trying to have. Like when we were trying to get JLABS Washington, D.C. done and our BARDA partnership done, we literally got for a variety of reasons, we had only 4 weeks to get the deal done. And so I went into my team, and the first thing I did is I pulled up a bunch of pictures of kids that were in Children's Hospital. And there were kids who were hooked up to machines, had no hair, and they're, just heartbreaking. And then I pulled up pictures of the team of Children's Hospital, and these are remarkable people who work their butts off, and they make not nearly what you make in a big company kind of salaries. And then I pulled up pictures of people who'd been in chemical attacks or in bombings or had Ebola. And I said, okay, now see all of these pictures. Now tell me we can't get this done in 4 weeks. If these people can do it, these people at Children's and BARDA can do this, if this is the impact we're trying to do, tell me we can't get this done in 4 weeks. And everybody's rolled up their sleeves, took off their jackets. Yeah, we can do this, right? If we focus on what we're trying to do, the impact we're trying to have for people, how we're trying to save lives or make lives better, you know what? We can fly.
That's awesome. And I think that human connection, has always been apparent to me with J&J's leadership, right? Is that there is the credo has always been mentioned. People know it, they use it. There's a deeply personal connection to patients and so forth. And I know time is really coming down fast here. Can you give me a hint of what drives you personally, Melinda, and maybe where you see the next 5 years for you and for JLABS?
Yeah, what drives me personally, having that experience of being a patient was quite level setting. Because I'd grown up so poor. So in my you can see a picture of my family behind me. I have 5 brothers, 3 sisters, my 2 parents, and my parents were immigrants, and we grew up in a house, or we started. Most of my family grew up. I only spent a portion of my time in a 864 square foot home at the end of a little dirt road in northern Canada. And that home had no plumbing, no running water, no electricity. So as you might imagine, particularly in the winters, life could be quite challenging. So from the time I was a little girl, I was bound and determined I'm not going to be poor anymore. And that's why I went into the tech industry, right? It was sexy, but it was also, you had this trajectory. I mean, you see it in the salaries in the Bay Area. There's no difference in what you make from an engineer who's had 4 years of college and $400,000 as a base to somebody who's a PhD, postdoctorate, how many years of school, how much debt, and maybe they're making $150,000. I mean, and so, that background really drove me to do something that was more in it for me. And then I realized that, when I was sitting there that night on my deathbed, I imagined myself lying on a bed of money. And guess what? It didn't help me at all. I came into this world naked. I was going to leave this world naked. And really, I was confronted with the question of, have I lived my life well? And we're all going to have to answer that question for ourselves. And once you've had that experience of having that answer to answer that question, you're going to have to answer that again at another point in time. And listen, I want to have a good answer. And so that's what has driven me to make a difference for other patients, to know that when they're at their most vulnerable, that they can know, if they're hoping and praying for it, that they know that we're there fighting for them. And so that's what drives me. And I think going into the future, when I see the opportunity to better commercialize these innovations, many of them get stuck, not just in the beginning, but all along the way. They'll get a big no from a company because maybe it doesn't make as much money as something else, or, maybe it's not as big of a population as there. And really, how do we get better access and care to all types of people? So this idea of inequity and injustice has driven me all my life, and you'll start to see more of that. And I know you and I have talked about, how do we better commercialize things? How do we have better models of getting care out to people, getting therapies out to people. And that's what I want to focus on. I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and we're making the most of our time here on this planet for everybody.
It's awesome. And maybe one last curveball before I let you go.
Awesome.
I always ask guests for a book that they would recommend to listeners. Is there anything that you would hold out as your number one or top two?
So I would say two. So last year at Bio, when we got to get together in person, I had the chance to go see, before the book really came out. I mean, it just come out, was Loonshots. And I listened to the author, Sofia, what's his last name?
Sofia Pakol, yeah.
Yes. And oh my gosh, it was captivating to listen to him. And I had to read the book. And it is this idea of how do you help why are some teams successful and some not? And how do you get past this tipping point? How do you become, the gardener versus Moses, right? How do you inspire the best of a team versus being, the authority that tells people what to do? And that was really inspiring, but it just doubled down on another book that I had read, which was referred to me by, I call him the executive whisperer, and his name is John Bates. He does a lot of sessions for us, and he helped me do my first TEDx talk. And it's called Leaders Eat Last, by Simon Sinek. And it's really about how do you bring out the best in a team. Listen, people say, oh, Melinda, you've done so much, you've been so successful. It's not me. Great people, we're a family, we're a team. And, each section of the team, the horns, the violins, the flutes, the percussion, everybody brings their best self to him, and then we create this amazing musical piece. So we all need each other. And one of the biggest compliments somebody's paid me is, I had one of our execs from another part of the J&J came in to be an interim JLABS site leader for a while. And we had a 2-day meeting. He left our 2-day meeting. He's like, that was the most remarkable experience I've ever had. I'm like, really? Why? Why was it remarkable? He goes, well, everybody contributed equally. Everybody was brainstorming. There was no egos at the table. You made decisions quickly. You got things done. And most importantly, you guys had a lot of fun before you started drinking. And that's a really important part of it. So listen, I think we're here to inspire our teams, and we're here to stand up for them and to remove roadblocks and champion them, so that they can do the impossible, especially when people think it's not possible. And so that's why, the Simon's book is a little bit more about the people, and Safi's perspective is, bringing in all the studies and the math behind it, but all of them say the same thing, which is, if you allow people to fly, and that's really what JLABS is. JLABS is about crowdsourcing innovation. It's about bringing out the best in people and helping them believe in themselves. And if you take down your own psychological hurdles, it's amazing what people can do. And so those two books are really, the two over the last year. Well, I would say I read Simon's a few years ago, but those have really had a real big impact for me.
Phenomenal. Well, that's a great segue, because Sofia was on this podcast a few months back talking about Loonshot. So
very good.
You're in good company.
Yeah, he's amazing. I'd love to listen to it, because he was phenomenal to listen to.
Yeah, he's great people. Melinda, thank you so much. I know that you have a lot more to get done in your workday, so I'm going to thank you. If people want to find out more about you, they go to JLABS and go through the website.
That's right. Go to our website, and if you want to learn about our companies, we have this great tool now called if you Google JLABS Navigator, you can go in, and it's a very cool tool to see all the different technologies around the world. You can slice and dice the data. by geography, by sector, by technology, by keywords, by R&D stage, by funding, all of that sort of stuff. If you want to get a sense of what's going on around the world, go check that out.
That's wonderful. I'll put a lot of that information in the show notes. Thank you so much, Melinda. Have a good luck.
Such a pleasure as always, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.